will be another 22 years before he is released. It is the 11th of February, 1990. In Panama, General Noriega has surrendered to the US military. In Yugoslavia, 45 years of communist rule have come to an end. In Romania, President Ceausescu has been executed by his own people. And in Cape Town, South Africa, it has just been announced that the world's most famous political prisoner is about to be freed. In a private villa, 30 miles from Cape Town, Nelson Mandela wakes up at dawn. Now aged 71, his day begins like every other during his 27-year sentence, with an exercise routine. With his release, today will mark the beginning of a new era for the people of South Africa. For the last 50 years, black South Africans have been engaged in a struggle against the ruling National Party's policy of racial segregation, or apartheid. A battle for racial equality in their own land. Mandela became their most prominent voice and stepped up the campaign with a call for violent retaliation against the brutal regime. In 1962 he was captured, tried for terrorism, and sentenced to life in prison. Newly installed President F.W. de Klerk has bowed to pressure from international sanctions to end apartheid and announced Mandela's release as the first sign of reconciliation. With the eyes of the world trained upon them, the way today's events are perceived will determine the future of South Africa. At 5 o'clock, Warrant Officer James Gregory arrives for work as usual, knowing today is the most important day of his career. Mandela must leave the prison at exactly 10 a.m. For 20 years, Gregory has been assigned to guard Mandela and censor all his correspondence. He is the only officer who the government has trusted to be with him throughout his sentence. Today it falls to Gregory to make sure that the government's wishes are carried out to the letter, so that they gain the maximum political capital out of the occasion. But as the early morning papers roll off the presses, the government has already missed its first opportunity to capitalize on the release. While Mandela has been in prison, they have banned his image. So the world has no idea what he looks like. President de Klerk arranged for an official photo to be distributed to the world's media last night, when the release was officially announced. But an administrative error means that the photo hasn't reached any of the newspapers before the morning print run begins. The face of the world's greatest symbol of resistance will remain a mystery until he is set free. For the first 25 years of his sentence, Mandela was housed on Robben Island, South Africa's most notorious jail. While he was in isolation, his supporters and campaigners around the world took up his cause, knowing that this was the only way to pressure the South African government into reform. Reluctantly, they had to concede that the health and security of their most dangerous prisoner was their #1 priority. So for the last 14 months, he has lived at the Victor Verster low-security farm prison in a private villa, a mile away from any other inmates. On Mandela's last day, the first visitor to the villa is the prison doctor, who gives him his final examination.
Okay.
Aged 68, he contracted tuberculosis on Robben Island and has received regular medical attention ever since.
Thank you, Mr. Mandela, and good luck.
Mandela's status also affords him the luxury of having his own housekeeper, Warrant Officer Jack Swart, the prison's head chef. As on any other day, he arrives on time to prepare Mandela's usual light breakfast. For the last 2 years, Gregory has allowed Mandela very limited access to newspapers. He has not been allowed to read articles about South African politics, but has amassed vast knowledge of foreign affairs from cuttings he has been allowed to keep. On this, his last morning in prison, for the first time Gregory allows him to read all the newspapers. But there is precious little concerning his release, because it has been announced so late. Outside the prison gates, thousands of supporters, officials and journalists are already starting to gather for his release. At 7:40 a.m, the prison governor, Brigadier Kulder, arrives at the house with the discharge papers. By signing these historic documents, Mandela is no longer a prisoner of the South African government. Gregory witnesses the event by adding his signature. They congratulate each other privately, knowing that this marks the end of an era for both of them. But although Mandela's free, he's not able to leave yet. He has now become a prisoner to the world's media, and there are still 2 hours left before he's due in front of the cameras. It's now 8 o'clock, and Gregory sets off to the front gate to pick up the first members of Mandela's reception committee. For security reasons, he has to escort all visitors to the house. These men are representatives of Mandela's political party, the until recently banned African National Congress, or ANC. With all the clamour for Mandela to be released, the government has had to recognise and negotiate with them. Today is the first chance for them to prove that they can work together. Mandela has remained in prison 1 week longer than originally agreed, to allow him and his ANC colleagues the time to plan the release for maximum political gain. He has to prove to his public that he hasn't given up his ideals, that his release is not the end of the struggle, but the start of a revolution. And while the ANC wants to continue their campaign to overthrow the white government, they also need to appear to be the party that can lead South Africa into a new era. Before his release was announced, Mandela had dreamt that his first day of freedom would be spent quietly at home with his wife Winnie and their family. However, it has been decided that the release is too important an occasion not to speak to the world for the first time in 30 years. But even hours before he is released, the location for his first words and what he should say are still matters for debate. Mandela isn't expecting a large crowd and suggests he makes his first speech at the prison gates before addressing a rally in Cape Town. But he is overruled, as the prison is in the heart of white middle-class South Africa. Instead, he is to be rushed straight to City Hall in Cape Town, but the speech is still to be finalized. Outside the prison, with an hour to go before Mandela appears, the crowd has built up to 4,000. People are perched wherever they can to get the first look at their hero since he was imprisoned. In Cape Town, thousands have already gathered in the exhausting heat. And news crews from around the world are starting to broadcast their first images. It's 9:30. Time for Mandela to get dressed, ready to leave. Gregory waits for him in his office. Once Mandela is changed, all they need is the go-ahead from the prison gates. Everything appears to be going to plan. Within half an hour, Gregory will have finished the job he started 20 years ago. Minutes later, the gatehouse calls. He's told that everyone has arrived to escort Mandela out of the prison. But as soon as he hangs up, he immediately realizes that someone is missing. Winnie Mandela, Nelson's wife, is stuck 1,000 miles away in their hometown, Johannesburg. Because the announcement of her husband's release came so late, she wasn't able to arrange a flight to Cape Town in time. Gregory breaks the news that Winnie definitely won't be there by the time they are due to leave and might not make it at all today. He's faced with a choice of either forcing Mandela through the gates on time without Winnie, or defying the government by keeping the world waiting, possibly for another day. The prison governor calls Gregory to find out why Mandela hasn't left yet. Mandela has told him that he won't leave without Winnie, so Gregory, at the risk of losing his job, tells the governor that there will be a delay. Mandela now has time to address the details of the speech. The ANC are keen to highlight the role that they have played in negotiating with a government that's hoping for reconciliation. But despite the fact that Mandela is being freed, the speech can't be seen to be appeasing a government that still hasn't abandoned apartheid. So for him, the question is not if they should keep fighting, but how. For Mandela's people, the black majority, most of whom live in townships across the country, the importance of the speech can't be underestimated. For 50 years they have lived with the misery of apartheid, which has left them powerless and poor. They've waited half a century for their freedom, their chance to be treated as equals. And so they're hoping that Mandela's speech will confirm him as the leader they've longed for. Under the midday heat, the crowd waits for information about Mandela's whereabouts. He is now 2 hours late, and nobody outside the prison knows why. In Johannesburg, Winnie is finally boarding her plane. On hearing that she is leaving, the prison governor sends out a message that the release will now be at 3 o'clock, 5 hours later than planned. Whilst Mandela takes a nap, Jack Swart prepares an unexpected lunch for the guests. Astonished at the thousands who have gathered outside the gates, the governor takes extreme action to avert a volatile situation within the prison by locking up all the non-white prison guards. At 1 o'clock, Gregory wakes Mandela to say that Winnie is on her way from the airport and he'll be able to leave the prison in 2 hours' time. But amongst a restless crowd of thousands in Cape Town, years of brutal oppression are coming to the surface. Violence breaks out between groups of Mandela supporters and the police. Several people are injured and taken away to makeshift first aid points, before ANC marshals manage to separate the two sides. It is 3:30, and Winnie Mandela has finally made it to the prison. Throughout Nelson's imprisonment, she has stood by him and campaigned for his release. Despite the impression of unity, their marriage is already faltering. Apart from the strain of 27 years of separation, their political views have diverged. With her arrival, everything is now in place for Mandela to leave the prison, albeit another 30 minutes later than planned. Military intelligence informs Gregory that one of the guards en route to the gate has been contracted to assassinate Mandela as he leaves. Gregory panics and tells Mandela that there will be a further delay. Mandela is eager to leave and join his supporters who have been waiting 27 years for his release. But he knows that Gregory wouldn't delay him unless the threat was real. So he leaves him to do whatever it takes. Gregory radios across the prison, insisting that all guards remove their weapons.
This is Warrant Officer Gregory.
On hearing this message, the prison governor overrules Gregory's order. The jail houses hundreds of prisoners, and disarming the guards is unthinkable. But Gregory refuses to move Mandela until the threat is removed. So, faced with the possibility of a further delay, the governor reluctantly orders all the prison guards to follow Gregory's order. Another 10 minutes pass before Gregory is assured that everyone has been disarmed and he can let Mandela leave. He orders Mandela's personal effects to be loaded into a van ready for his departure. 12 crates of books and newspaper cuttings that he has collected over the last 2 years. After over 20 years in his care, Mandela says goodbye to Gregory, their last moment as prisoner and guard.
We're back. There's excitement, there's movement. We've just heard that Mr. Mandela has left his home of the past 14 months. He's on his way to leave the Victor Verster prison. If I may turn around. Right there,
while the jail's most famous prisoner leaves for his appearance in front of the world's cameras, the locked-up prison guards have to watch events unfold on TV.
About 3 to 4 minutes, even maybe 5, before Mr. Mandela's car would be stopping at the gate.
Finally, at 3:45, the convoy sets off for the front gate. After 27 years in isolation, Mandela is about to enter a society that he knows little about, with an uncertain future for him and his nation. As the convoy departs, Jack Swart discovers that in his rush to leave, Mandela has forgotten the only 2 items he can't afford to leave behind: his glasses and his notes for the speech. His job done, Gregory pulls his car aside to let the others pass before they reach the gate. As Mandela goes by, he gives the ANC salute, a gesture of solidarity that until recently would have landed Gregory in prison. Swart tries to ring ahead to the front gate. But it is too late. Mandela's convoy has already arrived, and nothing's going to delay the release any further.
Mr. Mandela, who has grayed.
South African national television has suggested that Mandela walks the last 50 meters so they can identify him. This is the first time the government has allowed them to show his face.
Appearing in public for the first time any moment now. There's Mr. Mandela, Mr. Nelson Mandela, a free man taking his first steps into a new South Africa. That is the man who the world has been waiting to see. His first public appearance in nearly 3 decades. Walking strongly, step by step, further into freedom.
Despite what he has been told, he is completely bewildered by the crowd's reaction.
And one wonders,
In their excitement to see him, people surge past the marshals.
at this moment, the day he has also been waiting for.
Mindful of his security, he has returned to his car to be rushed to Cape Town, where he'll give his all-important first speech.
Mr. Mandela, who has walked his first steps to freedom into a new South Africa, now on his way to Cape Town.
"50,000 people have squeezed into the center of Cape Town. While waiting for Mandela, dozens have already suffered heat exhaustion and 3 people have had heart attacks. Now that the cavalcade is on its way, they hope to see him speak within an hour.
Total excitement. People running alongside the car. Pushing, touching the car.
Because thousands of people have jammed the roads from the prison to Cape Town, instead of taking the highway, the cavalcade takes the back routes through the lush vineyards. It is the first time for 30 years that Mandela has seen his country as a free man. As he passes through the narrow back roads, Mandela is amazed that so many people, black and white, have come out to greet him in a region that used to be a white heartland. By 6 p.m, when he's due to give his speech, Mandela still hasn't arrived. The crowd of 50,000 people who've been waiting all day starts to disperse, as they no longer think he is coming. As the cavalcade approaches the outskirts of Cape Town, supporters surround his car. It grinds to a halt and is unable to move for over an hour.
Douglas, I'm looking out of the outside broadcast van. There is Mrs. Mandela, right behind the broadcast van.
It's 7 o'clock by the time Mandela finally manages to arrive at City Hall.
Winnie Mandela, and with her, her husband, Mr. Nelson Mandela, the man in the grey suit.
By the time Mandela gets up the steps onto the balcony of City Hall, the sun is setting. But 10,000 of his staunchest supporters have stayed to hear him speak.
And Mr. Mandela is announced, and there he is. Nelson Mandela, 27 years since his incarceration.
And the crowd.
Back in the prison villa, Jack Swart watches on TV. He's been unable to reach Mandela and still has his notes and his glasses. Thankfully for Mandela, he doesn't need his notes. But he doesn't have another pair of glasses. So for his first public address in 30 years, he has to wear Winnie's.
Amandla! Amandla! In Africa! Hallelujah! Friends, comrades, and fellow South Africans, I greet you all in the name of peace, democracy, and freedom for all.
Mandela's speech, long anticipated by his supporters but feared by the government, lasts for over an hour. It's not until he calls for a continuation of the violent struggle to end apartheid and white political domination that his supporters hear the rally cry they've been waiting for. And the government realizes that this really is the end of an era.
It has to be ended by our own decisive mass action in order to build peace and security. The factors which necessitated the armed struggle still exist today. We have no option but to continue. We express the hope that a climate
After over 20 years in the prison service, James Gregory retires almost immediately, having played his part in this historic day.
I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die.
Caesar!